Let's talk about some of the firsts after 19 years in prison. Now, I thought about family, I thought about friends, I thought about food, I thought about freedom and the things I wanted to do, but what I thought about more than anything else was sex. Now, everybody that I've talked to, we agree that family and employment and changing the world and nature, all of these things are bigger and more important, but somehow biologically we were driven, or at least I was driven, to think about sex more than anything else. And I was really fortunate because I was actually in an existing relationship. I developed a relationship after years of knowing someone who started out as a reporter and I was a source. And then we developed kind of a friendship as that crossed boundaries as things changed in our life and she could no longer report on me. But at the same time, we stayed in contact. And then at that kind of perfect moment, we found ourselves both in this very vulnerable place. What was so strange about it was, despite the level of intimacy, and it was a really significant emotional intimacy, and despite the fact that we had known each other for years, we had never actually met in person until the day I got out. So there I was, sitting at the end of the prison driveway, waiting for her, getting in her car, and going to immediately explore, the physical side. Because what's the point in not? Like, if you have an emotional connection, you need to know if you're going to have a physical one. And we were prepared for it to be bad. And in fact, we had actually intended to just, push through. Because the first time we had a video visit and saw each other in person, this is really old, bad technology, it was horrifying. To both of us, it was just not good. It was not comfortable. Just all the way around did not seem good. So we said, okay, the first round of sex is probably going to be really bad, but let's get it out of the way and then see from there. And surprisingly and thankfully, it was not bad at all. In fact, it was really great. But that was the first, and it really was the culmination of all those years of fantasy. And it makes me realize, too, how dangerous fantasy can be, because we start looking for or expecting or hoping for something that isn't real rather than seeing what's right in front of us. And I feel like both of us were able to stay in that place where we could be present with what was and really enjoy it and really benefit from it. Now, the next first is the first meal. And I remember we went to Costco and we got these steaks. And this was before I had my breakdown, before I completely lost it, because getting out of long-term incarceration was incredibly traumatic. And as much as I tried, I really wasn't ready for it. And I thought I was going to have a steak for dinner. And then we were driving home. And my mother said, I'm sorry, we just don't have time to have the steaks. We'll have to wait. And I remember being like, I've been waiting almost 20 years for these steaks. Like, are you kidding me? But when we got home, I tried to eat some of the porridge, or not porridge, what is it, like stew that was in the fridge, and I couldn't eat it. I was still so adrenalized and hyper and crazy. There was no way I could get anything down. I actually felt sick. But thankfully, everyone went to sleep. And I remember after they went to sleep, I didn't sleep for 3 days, so I'm just up and I'm wandering around, and I went and sat on the porch in the dark. And that was when I really started to kind of come to myself. I started to really believe and understand and no longer just be in shock that I was out. Because I got a conditional pardon. I was going to be in there for 10 more years had I not gotten that pardon, and I didn't know until 2 o'clock that afternoon that I was getting out. But after sitting in that and after crying and after feeling joyous and just all these waves of emotions, it hit me that I hadn't eaten since that morning, that I was actually really hungry. And I started thinking, I was like, I think they said there's ice cream in there. And so I remember I went in, I opened the freezer, and I found one of those pints of ice cream, the Magnum ice cream with the hard shell. Only I didn't know that's what it was. So I'm just like, why is this ice cream so hard? What's wrong with our freezer? I can't figure it out. I remember I stuck it in the microwave for 10 seconds, and it was still hard, and then I stuck it in there for 10 more seconds. Ended up, I basically melted the ice cream, and it wasn't until the actual chocolate shell started to melt that I realized what was going on. But it didn't matter. That slurry of soft ice cream and chocolate shell was one of the best things I've ever had, possibly the best thing I have ever had in my life. And I did. I remember sitting on the porch with that slushy ice cream, just shoveling it into my mouth, just smiling, probably dripping it down my face, in the dark, hearing these nature noises, everybody asleep, and just feeling absolutely at peace and absolutely happy in a way that I didn't even know was possible. Now, my first date meal. So I was released on a Monday. And that weekend, I had to go help my girlfriend move from Richmond. She had moved to Richmond to be near her son to kind of make sure he got through the end of college. Then she was moving back to Charlottesville, where I was and where we were eventually going to be together. And so we had to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So I said, well, let's do a date night dinner, and then let's finish packing, and let's move all this stuff back. And she said, yeah, well, I don't know. Do you have any ideas? I said, well, let me make you a blackened salmon and some roasted broccoli. And she just looked at me. She was like, Jesse, I haven't been in prison for 20 years, and I don't know how to make blackened salmon. How do you know how to do that? And thankfully for me, I had worked at a restaurant when I was younger. And one of the dishes that I had picked up and that I remembered was blackened salmon. It's really simple. You literally just put some oil on the salmon, you put some seasoning on there, and you stick it in the oven, and it's amazing. It's delicious. We used to call it Cajun salmon where I was. But to me, it was really easy because it was one of the few things I remembered. Now, new adventurous recipes, yeah, I'm not sure. But there are a few things I know how to do, and I do really well. And even though I wasn't able to cook them for all those years in prison, it's not hard, and that doesn't go away. But I do remember that being the first time that I realized that I might have actually been better prepared, at least in some ways, for the world than other people. Because I had this idea in my mind that, like, everybody has this world figured out, and I'm so far behind and I have so much to catch up on. But I was like, wait, I can do something that somebody who's been out here, in the world for a long time hasn't been able to do. And that really did kind of make me feel better. One of the first really sweet gestures that somebody did for me, and actually two people did this for me. One was a friend who I've actually since had a falling out with, which absolutely breaks my heart because I know her and I love her and it's been the longest time. And another was a new friend who's now actually on my board and I consider just an amazing friend. And what they did was they took me out to really nice dinners. And I said, no, because I was still in this scarcity place where I couldn't afford things and I couldn't imagine other people affording things. And I felt bad. I felt like, no, please don't spend this. Like, I'll just go eat a frozen dinner. Or, like, I'll figure something out. And what they both said to me is, Jesse, you deserve this. And you need to know that you deserve this. And I'm here to buy you this dinner to show you that you deserve to have this, that this is okay, that you are worth this. You don't need to do anything to earn this. And after all those years inside, I don't know how to describe what that meant to me because I'd been in a place where I had been diminished. Prison was basically designed to diminish us and make us small and make us not as much people as we are numbers and show us that we aren't deserving and we're not worthy and we're broken. And them doing that simple gesture was so meaningful to me. I can't tell you the way it kind of started to give me some sense of like hope or maybe I am a person. Maybe I am deserving of and capable of things. And it's something I still struggle with. And I feel like I'm just now in my life getting to the point of accepting and kind of embodying who I can really be because I feel like for the longest time, I mean, some in childhood as well as some in prison, I was just diminished and I was taught to be small and I was taught that it wasn't okay to be more than that. And so the idea that, hey, I'm deserving of a good meal or I'm deserving of a good experience was really novel. And it really has shaped the way that I've seen myself and allowed me to grow in the world in ways that I never expected. So I remember the first time paying rent. So I was incredibly lucky. And one of the reasons I got such a leg up over other people was I had a place to go. So I lived at my mother's house for about a month. And what I ultimately realized is like that just wasn't sustainable. It wasn't sustainable when I was a teenager and went to prison. It wasn't sustainable now. And I was incredibly lucky that a friend of Courtney's, who's now become a friend of mine, has what she calls the Second Chance cabin. It's this little accessory dwelling unit behind her house that she's let a number of people stay in. Courtney actually stayed in it at one point. And she just said, hey, I want you to be able to stay in town. I want you to be close to work. I want you to be close to other things. Because I was dealing with a PO where I was at my mom's house way out in the country, who technically I wasn't even allowed to come into Charlottesville, where I was working, where like my whole life was, because the weird parole district or probation district actually had Charlottesville outside of it, but the area I was at the very edge of it. So it was like, you're telling me I can't go to work. And he was like, oh, don't worry about that. But the person who has the ability to violate me and send me back to prison for not telling me about this rule is telling me not to worry about it. Like, that feels a little tenuous. I don't really feel secure with that. But once I was actually able to then get into Charlottesville and be in this place, I had 6 months of living in town, and she would not let me pay rent. She would not even let me pay utilities. So I tried to do everything that I could. I tried to do sweet things. I got the house cleaned really well. When I left, I paid somebody to paint everything because she'd saved me so much money. And then Courtney and I actually bought a house together. So this was about 7 months out. We bought a house, we moved out there, so I started paying mortgage payments and having to put that together. And these were the first utilities I'd ever paid. I'd never had anything in my name, so I had to like call up the electrical company. I think she actually did the electrical company because she already had a deposit and I didn't want to have to put the $500 deposit down. But I had to call up the cable company to get us internet. I had to call up the water company. I had to set all the utilities up. And I'd never done that before. And I was so intimidated by that for some reason. Like these small things that are probably small to everybody else felt so big and so scary to me. But so I went from never having done that to paying a mortgage every month. And then actually when we broke up, I still pay the mortgage because I bought her out of the house, but I had to move into town and I had to pay my first rent. And I'd never paid rent before. I had like crashed with people and like given them some money or like drug money or something when I was a kid, but it wasn't the same thing. And I had to go through the process of applying for an apartment. And that was when I realized having a criminal record was a problem. Like some of them very clearly on the page say, with a criminal record, no need to apply. Other places will just turn you down. And I was really lucky because I wanted to be in town. I no longer wanted to live in that house, and so I turned it into a rental. And what I did was I just started looking on Facebook Marketplace. And at first it was just all rooms and college kids, and it was disastrous. And then I found this really nice apartment. It's where I'm at now. And so I contacted the guy. He said, yeah, here's the deal. And I was actually out of town when the tenant was going to be gone, so I had to have a friend go look at it. So I didn't actually even see the place in person until the day I moved in. But it was amazing because he said, yeah, I don't do credit checks. I don't do background checks. All I want to know is get 3 people to vouch for you and I'll rent to you. And I think that makes sense because he's like, hey, I don't care what your history is. Like, who are you now? Like, who are the people that can vouch for you and tell me who you are now? And he doesn't have problems with tenants. He's told me he's never had problems with tenants because he gets people from the hospital or from the school or from some reputable organization that helps kind of protect his interest. And he owns a bunch of these properties and he's made a ridiculous amount of money off of them. But I'm really happy to be here. Even though it costs money, I get to be central to downtown. I get to walk to the co-working space. I get to walk to a coffee shop. I get to walk to meet friends for dinner. I get to have people come over, and I'm in this kind of central location. And I really, really like that. But again, it came with the first time of paying utilities and managing all these things that I'm not used to managing. And it was overwhelming. And a big part of that was paying taxes, because I had never paid taxes before. Because I had worked as a kid, but I never made the $12,000 that I met for the threshold to have to pay taxes. And then in prison, I never made enough money to have to pay taxes. So I'm out, and I'm like, I remember the first year, I think I made like $6,000 or $8,000. And so I didn't really have to file anything. I could have just done nothing. But so I filed my thing, and I think I actually got some kind of tax return or tax benefit or something. And then that was easy. I just went to a guy who had the software and I paid him like $50 and he filed my taxes. That was good. But the next year, all of a sudden, I had like all these different income streams and I was trying to balance it out and I was freaking out. And I had to get an accountant. And I thankfully got a good accountant who helped kind of put all this stuff in place. And that was when I realized how expensive it is to pay taxes, like how much money I make, because all my money has been 1099. So I have to put the money aside to pay taxes and I have to make sure I balance it out and I have it right. And then I had to figure it out, and then I have to pay the accountant a bunch of money. And he's great. Like, well, it's a whole team, and they are great. But it still was overwhelming to be like, man, it is expensive to like live in the world. Like, this is not an easy thing to do. But another first for me was the first time legally riding a motorcycle. Because I had a motorcycle before I went to prison. I did not have a motorcycle license. I had a car license, and I had gotten some speeding tickets and all that, but it was really interesting because I had to go to the motorcycle safety class, and I knew how to ride a bike, and it wasn't like new or difficult, but yeah, it was really beneficial because I thought I knew, and there were some things that I really wasn't good at. And having been on a bike when I was younger, I'm lucky that I didn't hurt myself or kill myself because I didn't know the basic things. I didn't understand the motorcycle in the way that I learned in that class, but really in the way that I learned in the weeks and months after that, as I kind of applied lessons and watched YouTube videos and like really tried to get to know the bike. And even today, I feel like I'm a fairly good rider despite the accident. I don't necessarily feel like I know half of the things or even a quarter of the things I would know if I were to continue to take classes or I would continue to put into practice. But it was really interesting to be on the bike and for the first time know, like, yeah, I can get pulled over and I don't have to worry about it. Like, there's nothing illegal or wrong about what I'm doing because when I was younger, that was always a thing. Like, you ride without tags or you ride with a fake tag or you just know, like, if they try to pull you over, you better get off the road. And so being able to, like, be legit. It's like, I remember this the first time interaction with law enforcement after I got out. I was actually going to the the courthouse to pay my fines because I got out with like thousands of dollars in fines, and I was hoping that paying them off would get me closer to getting off probation. And that didn't actually happen. But anyways, I was going out and I had one of the AirPods, but not like a real one, like an off-brand. And I had dropped it. So I'm out in front of the courthouse, like shuffling around, and these two deputies come out and they're like, "Sir, can we help you, sir?" And I said, "Yeah, I dropped my earbud. Like, I can't figure out where it's at." And in my mind, I'm like, oh man, they're going to make me leave or they're going to like question me or they're going to pat me down. Instead, they both got down on like almost their hands and knees and started like rustling around where the leaves were and found my earbud. And I remember being like, God, that's such a different thing because I'm living a clean life. Like, they can shake me down all they want. They can pull me over all they want. Like, they could do all those things because I have nothing to hide and I have nothing to worry about. And for the longest time when I was living like a dirty life, I always had to worry about that. And there's something really validating and really, really nice about not having to worry about what they can find because there's nothing for them to find. But then I think about, the first job I had. I was really fortunate. I was contacted because, again, I was given an hour and a half's notice. I did not know I was coming home. I didn't have anything in place. I was contacted by an attorney who was an amazing person. He had been a civil rights attorney who had represented us and written briefs for people inside. He had helped change the grooming policy because we used to have to be clean shaven and couldn't have, more than a quarter inch of hair. He helped with the publication policy because we weren't allowed to have like Lady Chatterley's Lover or classic literature, all these different things. Basically, like everything you can imagine that was banned was banned. He helped change the policy around books because people weren't allowed to send us books. And he said that's a violation of their First Amendment right. If someone wants to send you a book, they need to have that right. And there's security concerns, but they can send them through Amazon or through a third-party vendor, just not from themselves. And so he fundamentally changed the experience for people incarcerated in Virginia. And he called me up right when I got out and said, "Hey, Jesse, I'm selling my house. I need some help. Would you be willing to come and do some carpentry? Like, maybe I can teach you some stuff and maybe we can help you along and then you can help get my property ready for sale." And so, of course, I love this guy. I would have done it for free. He offered to pay me what was then a really good wage, a really good salary. And I said, yeah, of course. And I showed up, and it was so funny because he had chronic pain. It was really kind of heartbreaking, but he was like, I'm going to show you some stuff. And then he realized, like, oh, you actually know how to do carpentry. Like, you've done this before. I was like, yeah, I did it with my dad as a kid. I did it, as a teenager. He was like, oh, well, I'm going to go back in the house and, like, take some more painkillers. And I got you. And what it did was it gave me the opportunity to be out in nature because he lived in this beautiful, beautiful area and just do some basic construction, some manual labor. Like there was a little bit of thinking and measuring and like figuring things out, but it was something where I could just be in my body and be present and take a break and drink a Snapple and then go back to work and, just look down by the woods. And it was wonderful because it felt like it gave me space to kind of heal because I wasn't locked in that cell anymore. I wasn't locked in that small space with all those people anymore. And it allowed me to kind of slowly transition because I think about if I had to go to, Wendy's or McDonald's and like get a job day one or be in a factory with the noise and the chaos, it would have driven me completely crazy. Like I needed that time to separate. And then I went for an interview. I'd gotten a journeyman's electrical license when I was in prison, and I was going to be an electrician. And so I got an interview with the local university, and they had the maintenance program, and it was great, and they would have paid me in good benefits. And I could not believe that I took the risk, but I turned it down. Because someone had told me early on that options are far more important than plans, and that the most important thing to have in life were options. So I prioritized that because that job would have been great, and I would have gotten benefits, but I would have been locked in from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. every single day. And I knew I wanted to travel. I knew I wanted to do advocacy. I knew I wanted to interact with people. I knew I wanted to have options. So I took a job with a local small business that was chaotic and far less organized and didn't have any benefits and didn't pay as well. But what it did do was give me options, and it gave me flexibility. It allowed me to work from home, or it allowed me to have the freedom to do so many different things as long as I got the work done. And it was a really amazing experience of realizing like, hey, I can do this. Like I can actually function in the world. And I've done a lot of stuff since. Social media exploded, which was a surprise. That led to starting the nonprofit Secondchancer Foundation and the work we're doing there. It led to speaking opportunities. It led to consulting that I've done. It just created, again, a world of employment and opportunity that I never imagined because I did not expect that I would be here doing what I'm doing. And sometimes I still have to pinch myself. I know I was flying back from Vegas from CES, from the Consumer Electronics Show, and I was exhausted because I was on a red eye, but I looked out the window and I was just like, I never could have imagined being here. I never once could have imagined being here. And yet here I am. Then I think about speaking of plane rides, the first vacation and then the first plane ride. So a few weeks after I got out was Courtney, my then girlfriend's birthday. And we got to go to the beach. And I hadn't been to the beach in, 19 or 20 years. So be able to go to the beach with her. And we had one of those condos with the, little balcony and to be able to look out over the water and go swimming and go to they have a gym down in Virginia Beach, out on the beach where you can climb and do flips. And it was awesome. It was I don't even know how to describe it. Again, that sense of freedom to watch the sunrise over the water, to sit there at night. It boggled my mind. And then the first plane ride, because again, I hadn't been on a plane in 20 years. I didn't know what that would be like. But we actually got invited out to California to go stay with a producer in the Hollywood Hills because we were developing a story for Netflix. And again, talk about pinching yourself. This can't possibly be true. But we did. We went, we stayed there, and we met with this really famous actress. We met with this really famous writer. We had this wonderful opportunity. And I didn't know how to believe that. I didn't know how to know that was possible. And even though that project didn't come out, they ended up going with another project, it kind of dropped what we were doing, it again gave me this sense of wonder and this sense of agency. Maybe I can do more than I thought. Maybe I can be a part of something. If these people think us worthy to go and have dinner with them and sit in their hot tub and explore Hollywood and take us down to Beverly Hills, maybe we are capable of doing more. Maybe we are able to exist in a different world than I ever imagined. And that's kind of continued as I've gone to South by Southwest and Rally and CES and these different trade shows, or not just trade shows, but these different events where I've walked in the room where I initially am oh, I don't belong here. Oh my God, these people are academics and they're tech people and they're successful or they're rich or they're super smart. And then I go in the room and I have great conversations with all of them. I'm oh, I can be in this room. And that's just a revolutionary thing to me because, again, for all those years, I felt like I was diminished and I was kept small and I was told what I wasn't going to be and never allowed to believe what I could be. And over the past couple of years, it's been me turning into or realizing just what I can be. And then was, I think, the first talk, because being able to speak, I went to a local university and it wasn't nearly a big deal. They put me up in a hotel and I went and I spoke in front of the class and I took some questions and that just kind of exploded into things. All of a sudden, I'm getting flown up to Boston University to stay in a really nice hotel and talk and get an honorarium. And I'm getting flown out to San Francisco to speak to their sales team at TikTok Central there. And that's such a strange trip because there's so many things I'm not allowed to talk about by NDA from that trip that it's just it boggles my mind. Like, big corporations just boggle my mind. And then it's been, South by Southwest and all these other schools and all these other opportunities. And it's been really amazing because it let me know that there was kind of a venue, or there was an interest in my story. But more than that, there's an interest in the story of inspiration, an interest in the story of redemption, but also an interest in change. Like, people care about the details of the system. People want to know, and people want to be able to make a difference, and they just don't know. It's just like, I didn't know anything about jail or prison before I went in. I remember the closest thing I came was, I had a buddy who got locked up for weed, and he was in the jail for a couple weeks. And I was trying to figure out how to, like, send him money or send him food, and I just couldn't figure it out, and was so, out of my mind and crazy that I didn't follow through. But I didn't know any of these things. I didn't know that we didn't have parole in Virginia anymore. I didn't know that we had basically, like, broken the system. I didn't know that jails were overcrowded and underfunded. I didn't know that people sat in those jails for years and years and years waiting to go to prison. I had no idea how bad things were. But now I can come out and I can talk about that from firsthand experience and not sensationalize it, or not say everything's terrible or everything's wonderful or any of this black and white thinking. I can actually say, hey, there are some things we do that are really good. There's some things that we do that are really bad. There are things that we do that are problematic. But come with the perspective of, hey, this is about everybody. This is about the incarcerated people. This is about the staff. This is about the people who were harmed. This is about the family members of both. And, like, how do we address all that? Like, how do we bring that together in a way that's meaningful? And that was, I guess, kind of my first stab at, like, real advocacy and, speaking in front of the General Assembly. Or I went up there today to speak for Lobby Day at a press conference and meet some delegates and senators and advocate for the Second Look bill here in Virginia. And the opportunity to get up there and share my story and having my voice heard, but not for me, like, heard for those people who were left behind, or heard for, in many cases, like, those victims who want input on their case, or, like, want to be able to have a voice, but don't have a voice afterwards. For example, I've got a buddy who's locked up who was convicted of a crime, and the people who were harmed in that crime, like, everyone involved, has petitioned for his release, and the governor turned him down for a pardon. He was like, no, I'm not giving you a pardon. And it's crazy because if you think about it, like, if the people who are harmed say, no, we think this is done, like, it's been 24 years, we believe he deserves to be out, why are we still holding him? Like, what interest does the state have if the people who experienced harm are saying it's through? And that's, again, the benefit of Second Look, because they would be able to have that in an open court. And I can't imagine a judge being like, well, they say you should go home, but I want to keep you because I'm mean. I don't know. But again, the ability to have a voice for other people who've been left behind is a really powerful thing, and I'm really grateful. And this has been my list of first, and the good thing to know is these are the first, but they're far from the last, because there are chapters waiting to be written, there are experiences waiting to be had, and I'm really excited to see what comes next, and I'm really grateful for you being along for the journey.